Which Beatle was the Playboy of the group? Hello guys and welcome back to Yellow Submarine, your dedicated Beatles channel. In this video we're going to be talking about something that's been on everyone's mind lately. Who was the Playboy of the Beatles? We've all heard rumours, but today we're finally going to figure it out once and for all. Before we get started, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel and turn on post notifications so you never miss an update from us. The Beatles were an English musical gang framed in Liverpool in 1960. The Gathering, whose most popular lineup contained John Lennon, Paul McCartney, George Harrison and Ringo Starr, is viewed as the most compelling band ever. They were essential to the advancement of 1960s nonconformity and well-known music's acknowledgement as fine art. Established in skiffle, beat and 1950s rock and roll, their sound consolidated components of traditional music and conventional fly imaginatively. The band later investigated music styles going from songs and Indian music to psychedelia and hard rock. As pioneers in recording, songwriting and creative show, the Beatles changed numerous parts of the music business and were frequently broadcasted at heads of the time's childhood and socio-cultural development. Driven by essential lyricist Lennon and McCartney, the Beatles fabricated their standing playing clubs in Liverpool and Hamburg more than a long time from 1960, at first with Stuart Sutcliffe playing bass. The centre threesome of Lennon, McCartney and Harrison, together since 1958, went through a progression of drummers including Pete Best before requesting that Starr go along with them in 1962. Chief Brian Epstein shaped them into an expert demonstration, and maker George Martin directed and fostered their account, enormously extending their homegrown accomplishment after their first hit Love Me Do in late 1962. As their prevalence developed into extreme fan furor named Beatlemania, the band obtained the moniker the Fab Four, with Epstein, Martin and different individuals from the band's escort some of the time given the casual title of the Fifth Beatle. Various stories, including each of the four Beatles, have surfaced since their separation, and some have even been known since their initial days in Hamburg and the Cavern Club. The Fab Four were viewed as less questionable, contrasted with other contemporary groups like the Rolling Stones, the Doors and the Kings. Regardless of not being just about as rambunctious as a portion of their friends, the Beatles wallowed intensely in the rock star way of life. Of the four Beatles, the notable Playboy was none other than George Harrison. George Harrison, MBE, 25th of February 1943 to the 29th of November 2001, was an English performer, artist, lyricist, and music and filmmaker who accomplished global popularity as the lead guitarist of the Beatles. Here and there called the Calm Beatle, Harrison accepted Indian culture and widened the extent of well-known music through his fuse of Indian instrumentation and Hindu-adjusted otherworldliness in the Beatles' work. Although most of the band's tunes were composed by John Lennon and Paul McCartney, most Beatles collections from 1965 onwards contained something like 2 Harrison arrangements. His melodies for The Gathering incorporate Taxman, Within You Without You, While My Guitar Gently Weeps, Here Comes the Sun and Something. He's also been nicknamed the Quiet Beatle because of his young age and shyness. The quiet Beatle George Harrison was a red-blooded womanizer who nearly split from his significant other due to his delinquent conduct. He was tenderly known as the Calm Beatle. Be that as it may, George Harrison was, truth to be told, a womanizer whose affection for the other gender nearly demolished his 20-year marriage. His many escapades have earned him the title of the Playboy of the Beatles group. George Harrison took part in an entanglement with Laurie Del Santo. The Italian entertainer admitted that she was in his organization for 3 days, personal with George Harrison. The Gathering occurred in Hiroshima numerous years prior. He was there for a show and she was visiting the area to recapture her actual first love, Eric Clapton, by whom she bore a kid named Connor, who passed on at a youthful age tumbling from an overhang. The entertainer got a call from Harrison, and from that point everything began. He revealed to her that he was a delicate darling and lover. He sought her and reserved a spot at the lodgings pool only for both of them. It was the only both of us, we did it in the pool. Then at that point we moved into his chambers and it was insane. Another of his escapades includes his affair with the Beatles girl Ruth Morrison. Ruth Morrison was a generally appealing and brilliant youthful Liverpool young lady who in 1958 figured out how to get the considerations of a little youngster named George Harrison amazingly. He had consistently been coquettish with the neighbourhood school children and discussed young ladies with his mates, yet he'd never been completely snared on a young lady until he met Ruth. As his companion, Ken Brown reviewed that George had never truly been too enthusiastic about young ladies. He was just 16 and at the Liverpool Institute with Paul McCartney. Afterward, he appeared to be overwhelmed with passion for Ruth. Fortunately for George, Ruth returned his warm gestures and they began an exceptionally pure sentiment, which consisted completely of hand-holding and kissing, yet never went any farther than that. It was somewhat because of Ruth that George at last had the chance to play an appropriate full gig with his mate John Lennon's band. John thought him very youthful to join the band appropriately, however he was so intrigued with his playing that he sometimes let him visitor on a couple of numbers, and that the Beatles got their gigs at the recently opening Casbah club, which Ruth and a group of companions were assisting the Best family with embellishing. George Harrison also had a brief affair with Bernadette Farrell. She was a youthful beautician who lived in Childwall. She initially saw the Beatles act in 1961 and when they turned into a fixture in the Cavern Club. After 2 years, she was 17 years of age, and George, who lived exceptionally close to her, asked her out by posting a note through her entryway. In an interview, she revealed that George was at that time her boyfriend, and that she had a little note that he gave her for their first date, which happened in mid-1963. She agreed to George being an exquisite, dazzling man, a mindful, private individual. At the point when the popularity of George began away from her all the more frequently, the couple chose to separate agreeably, and Bernadette never had any disdain about his choice to leave and proceed with his profession. Another brief affair occurred with one of the Bennett sisters, Estelle Bennett. It all started during the tour through 63 to 64, when the Beatle George Harrison started dating Estelle Bennett. The two hit it off right away. As indicated by Estelle, they continued running into one another at gatherings and social occasions and consistently discovered that they had locked eyes on several occasions regardless of the numbers of others in the room. They had conversations and saw each other quite often. They discovered that they loved the same things, which included long strolls while wearing agreeable garments and being with genuine individuals who enjoyed them for who they were and not because they were stars in the entertainment industry. She admitted to being at peace and very excited anytime she was with George, and there was something in particular with regards to him that made her open up and pour out whatever was at the forefront of her thoughts, and the Playboy also reciprocated the openness of heart as he would call her regularly late in the evenings to chat for hours. The couple was indistinguishable for the rest of the English visit until the Beatles left for Paris. At the point when the Beatles came to America, the Ronettes met them at their lodging in New York City. The Ronettes, truth be told, were closed by February 8, 1964 to invite the Beatles as they showed up in New York for their first US visit, an Ed Sullivan Show appearance. Be that as it may, the relationship flamed out. Estelle said, "We saw each other ordinarily. I was with him at the party after their show and on different nights when we just lounged around the lodging with the remainder of the gathering. Be that as it may, by one way or another things weren't something very similar. We were unable to reproduce a similar relationship we had when I was in London. Over there he's at his best, he's casual, and he's George Harrison Englishman and not George Harrison Beatle." Then there is his first wife, Pattie Boyd. As at the time of their first meeting, Boyd was involved with photographer Eric Swain when she met Harrison on 2 March 1964, and in this way declined his underlying date proposition. A few days after the fact, having cut off the friendship with Swain, she went with Harrison to a private Courteous Fellows club called the Garrick Club, escorted by the Beatles administrator Brian Epstein. With the Beatles much of the time away on show visits, she and Harrison accordingly saw each other as regularly as their professional responsibilities permitted. In July 1964, Harrison purchased Kinfounds, a house in Esher, Surrey, to get away from the consistent consideration of fans in focal London, and Boyd before long moved into the house too. The couple were locked in on 25 December 1965 and wedded on 21 January 1966 in a service at Epsom Register Office. In March 1969, as a component of the British specialist prejudice mentality towards the Beatles in the last part of the 1960s, Boyd and Harrison were captured at Kinfounds for ownership of cannabis. In March 1970, a month before the Beatles' separation, Boyd moved with Harrison to Friar Park, a Victorian neo-Gothic house in Henley-on-Thames. Boyd said her choice to leave Harrison in July 1974 depended to a great extent on his rehashed acts of unfaithfulness, finishing in his undertaking with Starr's better half Maureen, which Boyd called the straw that broke the camel's back. The craziest of all his relationships was the affair he had with his then wife Pattie Boyd's friend Charlotte Martin. After a separation from Eric Clapton, Charlotte momentarily lived with Pattie Boyd and George Harrison in his cottage Kinfounds in January 1969, preceding getting back to Paris to keep working. Charlotte engaged in extramarital relations with George, which crushed Pattie and Charlotte's friendship since she thought of Charlotte as a companion. Pattie went out and returned when George called her, revealing to her that Charlotte was no more. The infamous Playboy also had a hurl with Chrissie Wood, who was at that point the spouse of Ronnie Wood, an individual Beatle. It was in the spring of 1973 that George Harrison and Chrissie went to Spain to see Salvador Dali, as Pattie Boyd clarifies on her personal history, Great Tonight. Chrissie and Harrison became sweethearts on that occasion, and when they returned, they sat tight for their particular life partners in Harrison's home, Friar Park in Oxfordshire. Simultaneously, Ronnie Wood was infatuated with Pattie Boyd. Lastly, George later settled down with Olivia Trinidad Arias. Before meeting Harrison, Arias had contemplated reflection with the Indian master Maharaj Ji. Their common interest in otherworldliness, along with a way of life fusing vegetarianism, had a quieting impact on Harrison, whose dependence on medications and liquor Arias helped control. Arias brought forth the couple's child Danny Harrison in August 1978. The next month, Olivia and George wedded in a private function at the Henley-on-Thames Register office in England. They spent their coexistence till his last days. Harrison was treated for throat malignancy in 1997 and cellular breakdown in the lungs and brain cancer in 2001. George Harrison passed away in Los Angeles, California, United States of America on November 29, 2001 at 58 years old. With that, we've come to the end of the video. We hope you enjoyed it. Until next time, stay safe and goodbye.